Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen spoke at the NFL's annual meeting this week, and we are reading between the lines. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. What is up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks at horseshoehuddle.com. We are joined by a very special guest today, James Boyd of The Athletic. He is also host of the Fan Morning Show and host of the James Boyd podcast, as that would make a lot of sense. Welcome to the show, buddy. I think it's the first time in a while we've had you.
Yeah. Obviously, when you reached out, I was like, let's do it, man. Always excited to talk to you and Zach. Obviously, I read a lot of your stuff throughout the season. Zach, I'm looking forward to the draft guide every year as well, those types of things. You know, I invest in local journalism for sure. Having the privilege to go down to owners' meetings, I know everyone can't do it, but I'm always happy to share what I've learned and things we'll talk about for months at a time for sure.
Of course. No, it's the annual meeting is something I always say I'm going to every year, and I never do. And of course, I think I would have rather been down there in Florida than Indiana this week, all the weather and everything. But, you know, this is a good opportunity for those of you who are able to go down there. You know, free agency has happened, so some big stuff has happened. The last time we talked to Shane Steichen and Chris was at the Combine. So obviously there's been a lot of development since then. Obviously Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum, and, you know, Daniel Jones is here now. So one of the bigger takeaways, at least nationally, I think locally we all kind of expected it to go this way. But one of the big things that came out of this is Shane Steichen and Chris both confirmed that, you know, starting this spring in OTAs and throughout the entire offseason, it's going to be a pretty split load between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, leading to it being like a true 50-50 winner-take-all kind of thing. And sure, like I think Anthony is, you know, he's kind of earned the right to go in as the leader in the clubhouse a bit. But it seems like a little more than it's his job to lose. Is that right?
I would definitely say that was my reaction to what took place down there in Florida. I was like, wow, like they're really not hanging him out to dry, but it's very much like you have to earn it. You know, all of us have talked at length, whether it's been on podcasts like this one or in the media room, Jake, where we're like, man, like reps. That's what they preached at us. And then now it's like, hey, by the way, you said he needs reps, and now you're going to split them. And it's like, well, he has to, you know, make the most of them. And I was like, dang, okay. And then you have Chris Ballard saying they don't have to be best friends. They'll be respectful and professional because of their character. And there's no reason to think that they would be like mean towards each other, but it's definitely going to be a little bit awkward, I think, when you know this guy's my teammate, but he's here to take my spot if you're Anthony Richardson. So I definitely left that feeling like, oh, this is more of a legit, you know, QB competition than I probably thought. And not saying it wasn't going to be, but I always had the mindset of, oh, they're going to start Anthony, you know, week one. And then from there, that's when the competition starts. But now I'm thinking more like, man, okay, these are like some real, you know, reps and some real, certainly competition before week one even begins. And credit to the Colts, I guess, because they told us that from the beginning. But I feel more inclined to drink the Kool-Aid now, just based off some of the reactions we got. And then on top of that, just knowing what's at stake. And I think one of the most telling things that Chris Ballard said, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of it, but I believe Stephen Holder from ESPN asked him, hey, you know, hypothetically, is the best case scenario for you to have Anthony Richardson, you know, win the job? That way you kind of have that long-term, you know, stability, like not only win the job, but play well in 2025. And then you have stability at quarterback. You have an answer at quarterback. You probably have a long-term answer at quarterback. And his response was, no, our best, you know, case scenario is to, you know, start the guy who wins the most games. And that's us. That's what we're trying to do. And I was like, wow, okay. And it didn't sound like, you know, if it was one game or 10 games more, like it didn't matter. That's what it came off as. And I was like, okay, like they're really trying to make sure that whatever the case may be, they win games in 2025, whether it's with Anthony or Daniel Jones, and the youth of Anthony, the longevity that he could possibly provide, Daniel Jones being on a 1-year contract, like none of that really seemed to matter to Chris Ballard and crew because they were just like, hey, we're here to win, which they are paid to do. But a bit of a different stance, I would say, certainly from where Anthony was when he came back from the bench. And they're all saying, oh, he's our franchise quarterback to the end of the season. Oh, we need competition, to doubling down on it there in Palm Beach.
Yeah, and I gotta say I agree with that. Zach, what do you think? Because at a certain point, we all thought, Shane, Chris, and Anthony are kind of a package deal, and how one of them goes, they're all going to go. But now, kind of at a point where they got to win games by any means necessary, and got to take the training wheels off, and it's kind of up to Anthony to make sure that he wins the job if it's up to him. So, does this kind of change your gauge on this at all, Zach?
Not too much for me personally, and James can obviously react to what I'm about to say here, but my speculation reading between the lines is you kind of have to speak like that to keep that fire lit under Anthony's butt. Even if this is an expensive way to light a fire under him, is to throw all this money at Daniel Jones, you have to say it like that so he works his butt off this offseason, so he comes in as the best prepared Anthony Richardson that he can be. So I do think to a degree some of it is just like that messaging, being consistent with that messaging towards Anthony Richardson. But I think another aspect of this, and maybe this is the Colts looking back at the last two off seasons being like part of the reason why these backup quarterbacks weren't as successful come regular season as maybe they could have been, is because they didn't get a ton of off-season reps. I know Gardner Minshew did, obviously, but those got taken away after like week 1 of the preseason. Joe Flacco obviously didn't really get many of the first team snaps. And maybe it's just the fact that, look, Anthony's probably going to get hurt again. It's an unfortunate reality. You can't come out and just say, like, we expect Anthony to get hurt. But if the Colts need to win as many games as possible this year to get to the playoffs and to, maybe keep the jobs of Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, they kind of need Daniel Jones ready to go, even if he's just the backup this season. Like, you got to be prepared to play 6, 7, 8 games because that's what we've gotten out of the recent history of Anthony Richardson. So even if they're being completely truthful, saying like this is a legit competition, whoever's better, even by the slightest margin, will be the starter. Like, yes, I think all this tracks, but even if they're not being truthful, I think there still is a reason to give Jones those reps, is because odds are we're going to see him for a good amount of snaps this year.
So this is why I read Zach. I definitely agree there, because the elephant in the room is the injuries. And that's the part that no one can really give you a definitive answer on. Like, you can't predict the future. I believe at the Combine, I asked Chris Ballard, and others did as well, like, what's the difference between like being injury prone versus being, a guy who is just unlucky? And is there really a difference? Like, I mean, we can talk about it all day, but it doesn't matter. We're going to look at games played. And that's the thing that Anthony just hasn't had. You can look back on it and say, oh, if he never got hurt or if we didn't start him right away, but you can't go back and rewind time and say, oh, this particular play was just unlucky. The bottom line is he's missed time, and you can kind of bank on that happening again. Because if you look at Anthony's career, I mean, going back to high school, which I'm sure you all have talked about,
right? 2
things he's never been is healthy and accurate. Like, those are the 2 things that have kind of plagued him throughout his life, even at the age of 22, about to be 23. So I'm excited to see how he responds to it. Because I thought they don't have to be best friends comment was interesting from Chris Ballard. And I'm like, okay. But also, to Zach's point, I also believe that they're like, there's no reason for you to come in and feel comfortable at all. Like, and maybe that was a little bit too much of that last year, which led to the benching perhaps, or maybe feeling, a little bit too much of yourself, too big of yourself, and you hadn't accomplished anything. Whereas with Daniel Jones, I mean, yes, he struggled in the NFL. He had the one kind of like anomaly season in 2022, but the one thing we never hear about him, and from talking to people who've covered him, written about him, people who, obviously have worked with him just internally, the working hard part is not an issue at all. And so if I'm Anthony Richardson, I am stalking Daniel Jones. I'm doing everything he does, and you are not. I'm looking over my shoulder, making sure that you're right there, or looking over your shoulder to make sure I'm right there, because you don't want to be seen as the guy who isn't working just as hard as the new guy.
Yeah, and I don't want to add to speculation about Richardson, what happened last year or anything like that, because I wasn't there. I wasn't in the room. But this is a way of the Colts saying, like, you need to be 100% committed to everything Colts football this year, Anthony.
Yes.
Because you are not walking in here as the starter. This is a real competition. Even if it's not a real competition, even if behind closed doors, Steichen and Ballard are, doing rituals saying like, please, Anthony, please figure it out. Like, stay healthy, do your thing. Like, even if they're doing everything they can possible to make sure it's going to be Anthony, they still need to tell him that maybe it's not. So he is 100% committed. Again, I think maybe it's an expensive way of doing something where in a job setting, if you're telling someone like, hey, you're on the hot seat here, usually that lights the fire. But if you have to do it like this because he's a young kid and that's the way you think it can get through to him, if as long as it ends up working, that's fine for me,
Yeah, that is it's certainly the biggest yet again storyline for the Colts is quarterback. Will there be consecutive seasons ever where we're not questioning the quarterback? We do not know. Coming up, guys, we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball and a couple eye-opening statements that were made this week. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart and the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Colts forward as we look ahead next season. This week's Armada clear-cut Player of the Week is, drumroll, linebacker Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. This one's picking up a lot of steam lately. Just like the Armada, Campbell conquers the road with capability and confidence. He's smooth out in space, but he is rugged in the trenches. Dream big, go big, Colts fans. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what we think Jihad Campbell can do here in Indy. It's clear that our Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. So take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. You guys like that? That was good. That was good.
That was smooth.
All right. So, all right, we're talking defense, and this, by the time the draft is over, maybe the much more exciting side of the ball. And I mean that in a really good way, because some of the start that the Colts have gotten off to this offseason on defense, by no means should they be done. But getting Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, two of the top defensive backs in the free agent market, absolutely, they had to do that. And it was also turning over a new leaf. We saw them be more aggressive and close deals like they really haven't done before. But there are, some needs still available and some comments that were made. So let's start up front with the defensive line, obviously. So Dayo Odeyingbo leaves in free agency to the Bears. There's obviously only so much money that can go around. But it seems like the Colts are really reliant on Laiatu Latu taking a big jump. And also Samson Ebukam kind of bucking the trend of father time and being a 30-year-old coming off an Achilles that's going to look remotely like he did 2 years ago. So, James, what are we thinking here? Are they too reliant on the guys they've got? I mean, surely you expect more to come in the next month or so, right?
I try to give some GMs grace because, every team in the league, they're never going to be like a foolproof system. Unless I guess you're the Eagles and every position is just loaded, right? And you draft well and you replenish well and you cut guys and you add guys for cheap contracts that all work out. But in the case of the Colts, I'm like, man, are they kind of overstating what Samson Ebukam could be in the absence of Dayo Odeyingbo, who obviously went to Chicago, played the most snaps for you last year at that position? I'm like, man. So me and Chris Ballard had a little like this, a little head-to-head at the owners' meetings. Nothing like too crazy. It was respectful, but
That's
we're
how
talking about
he loves you, though.
He
will only do that to those he loves.
Look, I respect it. We throw jabs at the guy all day in a respectful way, and he throws one back. I'm not going to get offended about it at all. It's funny whenever that happens, like publicly, and I'll get a message like, man, he was so mean to you, and it's like, no, it's fine. Like, we're just talking ball. But talking about ball, I was like, look, man, I understand that we were talking about Samson Ebukam, and he brought him up. He's like, man, James, you've been hard on this guy. And I'm like, yes, but not because I don't like him. Not because I think he can't be a good player or hasn't been a good player. I have doubts about him being a good player again, but it's because of the Achilles and the age. I'm like, he's 30, man. He's not, Cam Akers and, had it super early and was, a lighter player and things like that. With Samson, I'm just concerned that he can even get back to a level of being a disruptive defensive lineman just because we've seen the Achilles injury play out. And, I asked Chris Bell, like, hey, I know you're, pushing back at me, but I'm pushing back against you for a moment. Why do you keep believing in this? Like, we've seen Achilles tears really, derail careers at this stage of them, especially being just 1 year removed. It's always usually, not a doctor here, but it's usually like that second year post-op when people become who they were. You look at obviously Dial early in his career. Julian Blackmon was another one. And then just as fresh as it was last year, you cut Dallas Flowers after telling us that he was going to be a guy for you because he just wasn't the same athlete after the Achilles. Like, he would probably admit that himself now. But I say all this and I look at it like, man, to me, it's a gamble. And I just wonder if you had cut him and used that money elsewhere to go get, maybe not the high market, super high end defensive end, but someone who's, a veteran, proven guy, somebody that's more of a, just a healthier option. Would that have been a smarter bet? So that's one of my biggest things with Ballard this offseason is like, yeah, the QB competition is one thing, but that to me is a hell of a risk. And then to kind of put a button on it, you're really banking on Latu becoming a dude next year, which is fine. Like, this upcoming season, you didn't draft him 15 overall to not be a guy, but you're really, really banking on him being, a 10-sack guy so that Samson Ebukam doesn't have to be that guy, which he kind of was 2 years ago. I believe it was like 9.5 sacks. So we'll see. But I was just like, man, look, check the tape when it comes to Achilles injuries, that first year. And I don't even care that it happened, before the season and all that. It never, to me, it rarely works out that first year post-op.
Well, I want to give him credit because we're not even to the draft yet, but this is kind of shaping up to be the secondary last year. How we're like, dude, you're relying on a bunch of guys who have never had a clean bill of health, and that's what you're looking at now. Outside of Latu, pretty much your entire defensive end group is entering their final year on their contracts, and Taekwon has had issues. Samson's had injury issues. Kwity Paye has never been the healthiest guy on earth. So you got to make probably a veteran and another rookie or something. You can't enter how it is right now because you're just putting a lot on the plates of guys who have not really had the longevity throughout a season. But Zach, what do you think? I mean, it's got to be a decent priority to add on the defensive line, right?
Yeah, I can't really add too much to what James said there because he kind of summed up a lot of our conversations prior to free agency on here. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm not rooting against Samson Ebukam. Like, I want this guy to be awesome. I want to be proven wrong. It's just I don't want to invest $9.5 million reasons into whatever it was, $10 million into, this guy overcoming these crazy odds that we just haven't seen guys overcome. I mean, arguably guys like Romeo Okwara and Carl Lawson were more productive than him heading into their torn Achilles when they were nearly 30 years old. In Lawson, it's taken like 3 years to get back to being a productive NFL player. Okwara is basically out of football right now. So it's just a very unlikely thing that the Colts are banking on with Ebukam. One thing I will defend, though, with Ballard is there is still some guys out there who can be productive pass rushers on the open market. And when you see like, oh, the Colts aren't signing anybody right now, they currently have a comp pick coming in for EJ Speed as of right now. So there's no real rush for them unless guys start flying off the board. So they'll wait until after the draft to maybe address that. So there is still some time, but like James said, I mean, we said it so many times on the show prior to free agency, like this is like an easy decision. Like, you should cut Ebukam. Most GMs do that, but Ballard does get a little sentimental with his guys and relies on their own like effort coming back from injury a little too much.
Right. I promise I'm not heartless, but I was just like, look, man,
right.
This is what you got to do sometimes. So again, to Zach's point, if I'm wrong, great. I will eat it. I will stand before Samson Ebukam and write the greatest redemption story ever. Yeah. But I'm skeptical, to say the least.
Right.
I think that's fair.
It's like we, as people covering the team, we have to view it from the sentimentality of just being like, oh my gosh, if he overcomes this is great. This is great content, right. Great dude. Like, I hope he does it. But we also have to cover it from like the asset management perspective of the Colts, where it's like, this is a bad way of managing assets. For me, I'm glad he's getting his money. I'm happy he's getting his money. I don't care. You can take it. It's not my money. But right. As covering the Colts, like, I think the Colts could spend money in better ways than a near 30-year-old pass rusher coming off an Achilles injury.
I will say, I mean, if he's good at all, he's obviously a good asset to have there. I think he was sorely missed last year. It's no mistake that they had such a productive pass rush 2 years ago, and then it fell off quite a bit last year. It wasn't just because of him, but I mean, if he can give them anything, let's say he's not going to be an explosive pass rusher, but he can set a mean edge and is good against the run. Like, you can take that. I mean, it's probably a high price tag for it, but I feel he'll have some utility for the Colts. But I mean, it's probably not what you got a couple years ago. Coming up, guys, there was some other stuff to take away. if you read James's work and looked at what Chris Ballard said, Shane Steichen said, kind of opened up some things about Lou Anarumo and maybe some things about how the Colts may approach the draft as well. All right, let's stick on the theme of defense here real quick. So reading you, James, and reading Joel this week, I just really started looking at Lou Anarumo a little bit and think more of what might happen. And multiple, that's the word that keeps coming up. Versatility, aggressive, multiple. Ever since they hired him, we hear that every time someone talks about Lou. And to me, I'm thinking, positions they need or don't need. I don't know that any position group is off the board, even in the first round. Like, are you guys kind of getting that too? Like, would there be any position group on defense that they draft and you're surprised, like, even if it's cornerback or safety?
Yeah, I would probably be a little surprised if they went like safety in the first round, just because they invested so much money in Cam Bynum and they are so high on Nick Cross after the season he had and his pairing, in theory with Cam Bynum. But I could see them going cornerback, D-line, linebacker, whatever, because you don't really have those positions that I just spoke about like solidified, if that makes sense. There's no one that, and then because you're picking 14, it makes it more fluid anyway. Like even last year, I don't think any of us could have like necessarily predicted that they would land Laiatu. Not that like they would land him, but land him in that fashion where you see 14 offensive guys go. So who's to say how the board falls this year? And everyone, is saying, boo, get Tyler Warren. But like, that's not exactly how it goes. You can't just like magically make it happen.
Right.
But looking at the defense, I could see them going linebacker. And to me, that's one where I could really make an argument like, wow, could they go and get like a really, versatile linebacker? I'm blanking on his name right now. Out of like the guy to UCLA. I'm not saying go first round, but like second round. Yes, I like him. Versatile guy, can very rangy, sideline to sideline. Like I could see Lou Anarumo toying with that type of guy and making him, a really impactful player in this defense to pair with Zaire Franklin. So I could see them going a couple different places for sure. And maybe that's better for the Colts. That way I get a chance to really predict their board. I know Chris Ballard gave us some slack there, Jake. We were down there. He's like, yeah, you guys always want to predict stuff. And some of you guys are wrong. And I'm like, well, tell us. Right. Feel free to share your board with us. But that's where that conversation kind of stopped a little bit. So we'll see what they decide. But defensively, there are definitely some holes there they have to fill, or at least just give you more depth there. Even cornerback, man. I would definitely be, not opposed to for drafting a cornerback and even getting more competition in that room, whether it's the new rookie, assuming you draft one, with Sammy Womack, with Jalen Jones, just to kind of create more of that competition that Chris Ballard doubled down on after the season.
Yeah, and Zach, I know you and I feel kind of the same on this, but it looks even better if you trade down and get more assets. Like, let's say you sit at 20 and you gain an extra third or fourth round pick, whatever. You got more shots at the board, and it becomes a little more enticing to get some of those defensive players then.
How dare you say trade down to a Colts fan base? That you cannot mention those.
You and I are both pro trade down.
Trading down is typically the right play when it comes to asset management. When it comes, analytics back this up, that the more shots you have, the more likely chance that you have of hitting on these shots here. I think that does change if like a Tyler Warren's on the board, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in just a second, because the need at tight end is so massive that they just can't ignore it in the top 50 picks in this draft. But they certainly just need talent. When it comes to the defense, you were like the 31st defense in almost every metric last season, and you're getting a new coach in here. Nobody's safe. I know they have some high-paid guys. They have some veterans on there, but nobody should be safe on this defense when they perform the way they did last year. So corner, safety, even linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle. Look, if they have a blue-chip grade on one of these guys and they fall to 14, whatever the position is, take it, because this team's not in a great enough spot to where you can just ignore a blue chip talent, So I know they're going to be pretty pigeonholed when it comes to tight end, but other positions, I feel like they can just get the best player available, for lack of a better term there.
Zach and Jake trying to keep us in the facility even longer. But no, I would not be surprised by a trade back. Honestly, it will be a smart move, in my opinion, if you can't get, just your number one guy at that spot. I don't mind that at all. And hell, as long as you don't trade back on day 3, I'll be fine. But we'll see what the Colts do. Because 7 picks, I mean, I'm sure you all have talked about it. I would not bet that they keep just 7 picks.
Oh, no, they're going to.
This is Chris Ballard we're talking about. So that day
Round
3.
2 moving back.
Yeah, exactly. It might get a little dicey there, as far as, my weekend plans when the draft comes up. But I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of Jake for sure.
That's right. We're getting cozy. But no, I think when it comes to getting someone in that first round on defense, I think it definitely would have to be someone that kind of wears a lot of hats too. Like Jalen Walker and Jahad Campbell both affect the game in so many different ways. Even Malachi Starks, maybe we're too quick to dismiss Malachi Starks as a possibility because of everything he can do. But I don't see them grabbing someone who's kind of a one-trick pony. But we're kind of talking about tight end there. Let's shift that way. So again, I was reading your piece again this morning, James, and how Chris Ballard was talking about tight end, it really, really sounds to me like, without saying, yes, we're going to try like hell to get a tight end like that, they have every intention of getting one within their first few picks. I've got to think, if not, they're in the first round.
Absolutely. I thought there was like a Freudian slip there for a second because
right? It was weird.
we didn't get a chance to how do I want to phrase this? Like, I did not ask flat out, do you need to draft a tight end? But I was like, how do you evaluate the tight end room? And I don't know what I was expecting as an answer, but that's when, Chris Ballard kind of got fired up and he went on his soapbox and talked about Jack Doyle being a difference maker and a game changer. And I thought that was a different tone than we've heard from him and Shane, honestly, about that room and about those guys, because last year and the year before it was, we have, a number of guys who did different things, a collection of who they are. It was basically like the sum of the parts. But now it's, oh man, we could use a playmaker. We could use a game changer. And he talked at length, Chris Ballard, that is, about Jack Doyle. I mean, it was like a minute and 30 seconds of him just ranting, raving about how great Jack Doyle was. It wasn't sexy, but it was effective. And if you look back, he was like their last year-to-year productive tight end from just a receiving standpoint. And I don't even know if you look at Jack Doyle's, his best trait was receiving. I mean, he was a great, phenomenal blocker, but he also produced. And so when he mentions at the end there, I can't dictate the draft, I was like, this has been on your mind for the draft, Mr. Ballard, which shouldn't be a surprise. This isn't like some huge scoop that he, spilled the beans. I mean, we all know they need one. But for him to kind of come out and say that lets me know that we should expect a tight end drafted, I would say, in round 1 or 2, or at least day 1 or day 2, to address that need. Because right now, to be quite honest, they don't have a starting caliber tight end on their roster at all. I know someone asked me the other day on the radio about Jelani Woods in our YouTube chat, and I was like, look, Jelani Woods, in theory, is great. I know we all love the idea of Jelani Woods, how big he is, how strong he is, how fast he is. He hasn't played football in 2 years. You cannot bank on that at all. Just like you can't bank on Juju Brents. It's fine to have him on the roster as depth and as competition. And if they surprise you in camp, great. But you need to go out there and I believe definitively get a guy you can plug and play right away. And in this year's, class, there are, I would say Zach probably knows more than me because he's, huge on tape and learning these guys. But just even when I was at the combine, anytime I talk to anybody about tight ends, it's a deeper class than in years past. So there are options out there, and I would expect the Colts to go out there and get one of them.
Yeah, I think it's from the sound of it, they want a bona fide guy. They don't want they don't want a Jelani Woods that they have to wait a couple years on. Yeah, it sounds like they want a dude there. We've heard in the past Chris say, it'd be great to have Travis Kelce, but we don't have that. We don't need it. Like you said, kind of a sum of their parts, the group can accomplish what a tight end needs to. But it sounds like him and Shane are very much swaying towards we need a guy who can stay on the field and do a bit of everything. So, Zach, I know you feel that way too. That's got to be accomplished in the first 2 days though, yeah?
First 2 rounds, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't even think you can wait until round 3. I know this is a good tight end class. You can get a bunch of solid role players after the top 3 guys, but I do think it kind of stops after those top 3 guys of getting players who can let you live in 11 personnel. And I can't remember if it was your piece, James, or if it was the Colts.com piece from JJ that I read where Shane Steichen specifically mentioned that getting a tight end.
It must have been JJ. Yes. Okay. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Getting a tight end that lets you play in 11 personnel. And look, when you're looking at this class, it's really just the top 3 guys. It's Warren, it's Loveland, it's Mason Taylor. And even Taylor and Loveland, their blocking is not perfect right now, but I think that they can be fine enough to where you can live in 11 personnel. But once you get past those guys and you get to like the Harold Fannons who are playing at like 215 pounds, you're probably not going to play him in line too much. When you get to the Thomas Fadones, he's not a great pass catcher in college, and you have to project that a little bit. I really do think the Colts have pigeonholed themselves so much here at tight end that one of those three guys has to be within the top 50 picks. So whether it's holding your breath for Tyler Warren to fall at 14, moving back and taking Loveland, or moving up in round 2 to get Mason Taylor if you go best defender available in round 1, I think the Colts are kind of stuck having to take that tight end. And that's not even from, just from the owners' meetings, from hearing what James and JJ and all you guys had to say. It's like, you can just look at the roster.
Yeah, like, duh.
Yeah. Like, you can just look at the roster and be like, yeah, you guys have to take, like, even if Ballard came out here and said, we like who we have and we love the, Albert O is going to have a great season this year. Like, there's nothing he could have said that would have made me look at that roster spot and be like, no, you guys are obviously taking one. Like, so
100%.
Yeah, top 50 picks, they're certainly going to take one. Honestly, I would say top 40 picks, they're guaranteed to take one. And they don't even have 2 picks in the top 40. It's just, if you don't get one round 1, you almost got to move up just to get Mason Taylor to lock in a guy who can start in 11 personnel next year. So it's not the way that I prefer a GM to operate. And this is probably my biggest bone to pick with Ballard every offseason, is there's always a position that is so clearly needed in the draft. And I hate relying on these young kids to be like day one stars, but at tight end, they need it. They need one of those top 3 guys, or it's going to be a failure of a draft.
Yeah, I think the only one I'm confident they can come away with is Colston Loveland, because there's a lot of smoke about Tyler Warren being in the top 10. Loveland usually is anywhere in that, dozen to 20. And then Mason Taylor, probably not going to be able to get him if you wait at 45. You're going to have to move up or move back in the first round. So you're probably going to have to do a little bit of moving. Like, if you're that intentional about getting a tight end, you probably can't just sit on your hands and let the draft come to you. But yeah, go ahead, James.
I will say this real quick. I know that Loveland's coming off the shoulder surgery. So you say shoulder surgery in Indianapolis and everyone's like, oh my God, like Andrew, Anthony, like, we don't want to hear that. And he told us that the combine, you might've been there, Jake, but I believe he was saying he won't even be cleared for contact, I believe, until like August. Yeah. And so I just wonder, like, does that, hinder your development and your ability to come right in right away and, be a factor? And obviously there's other things you got to learn the playbook and schemes and stuff like that, but your ability to hit the ground running, because they can't wait. That's the thing. I know Loveland's like the younger prospect when it comes to him or Tyler Warren, and he has, a ton of upside, but upside isn't necessarily the thing that they can like wait for, if that makes sense. Like, yes, you want all these young players to have a ton of upside, especially when you're picking them that high, but also you need it right now, because if you don't have a great season, who's to say anybody's going to be back next year? So I know some Colts fans are like, well, it's the Colts. They'll all be back next year. What are you saying, James? But for security purposes and with your job, it probably behoove you to go out there and get somebody who can help you right away. And I just wonder how they feel about the shoulder, and if that's something that would, potentially, make them a little bit hesitant, or even, just make Loveland slide a little bit, that makes them available for you at, let's say a safer pick or something like that. Like, if you trade back to 20 or something like that, maybe you feel more comfortable taking them there versus taking them at 14.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you look at Loveland or Mason Taylor and you fast forward a few years, both of them could be better players than Tyler Warren, but Tyler Warren is probably the guy that gets on the field and contributes most heavily immediately among that group. So that is a good way to look at it. I mean, that, because tight end isn't always an immediate hit, even the best ones. Like, you have to wait a couple years. So if you've got a guy who, you need a tight end right now, you don't need a project. So, like, if you've got a guy who's going to be able to come in and do a lot of different things for you and contribute right away, you probably got to get a little aggressive and see how much you can move up. I mean, obviously they tried last year, but
would you all consider trading for one, like a veteran?
If you don't get one of these top 3, you have to go. You have to be a little aggressive to get a Goddard. You have to be a little aggressive to get. I mean, I don't even know if Mayer really does much to like with his production last year, and he missed some time. I think he had like some personal stuff last year that caused him to miss some time. But yeah, I mean, you have to if you don't get one of these top 3. It's just they're so pigeonholed right now.
Yeah,
I've ranted about this too much. It's just not the way you should operate with a position. But
the Colts are like, we don't know you don't know our board. But I'm like, I know this need is very high on the board. Like, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
No, I agree. I think if you like if your top tight end that you come out of this draft with is like Terrence Ferguson or something, great player who projects well, I think, but you have to go out and get a veteran to go with him. Like Michael Mayer for a future,
Mo
like
Alley-Cox.
Mo,
Alley-Cox,
honestly,
baby.
if Mo is willing
Yeah.
to come back and like deal with the same old crap, like, okay, but like the only way to avoid having to acquire 2 tight ends is to get one of those top 3. Otherwise, I think you've got more work to do there.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, we scrapped one whole topic, so we will maybe get to that another time. We obviously went a little long, but this was great. Now, for a quick little somber moment here, we didn't want to get out of here without mentioning the fact that our colleague John Samasco, Jersey Johnny from 1070, passed away this week. Incredibly great guy with a philanthropic heart. Like, did so much for the community and especially the veterans. Did a lot with World War II veterans and everything. I always had positive experiences with him when he was with the radio station and he was in the Colts facility. We were doing locker room stuff all the time. So really good guy. I mean, the first time I ever got on radio doing Colts stuff here in town was with him on his weekend show. And I used to listen to that all the time. So I don't know how much interaction you guys had, but obviously he's kind of left a lasting impact here in the city.
Yeah, personally for me, I didn't know him like personally, but just from hearing the stories from the station the last few days, the last week or so, and enthusiasm he had for the Colts, like moving his family here and laughing about those things, and obviously honoring the veterans. I know, we can kind of get caught up in our daily lives and take for granted, at least I do sometimes, of the beauty of living in America and having the privileges and freedoms that we have. So I have to respect anyone who continues to honor those who really put their lives on the line for us. And so, rest in peace to him for sure. I know Zach knew him better than I did just personally, but I wanted to just jump in there and say, yes, our radio family at The Fan was certainly, feeling and thinking about his family throughout this time.
Yeah, no, Jersey Johnny gave me my first radio spot, like just weekly call-in stuff in the Indy market about probably 4 years ago at this point. I was going on there on and off for about two-ish years or so until his unfortunate when he left the station due to his health concerns. And I remember I was on one of his last couple shows and stuff, and it was kind of emotional even for me. Just one of his last couple shows as someone who came on every now and then and got to talk with him. I wish the best for his family. Johnny was a really good dude from all my conversations with him, and I wish I could have met him in person. Obviously, the distance is a little bit tough there, but really nice dude, and I always appreciate him getting me on the radio out there in Indy for those couple years that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. So his family mentioned that an obituary and services will be coming. So if you're interested in any of that, keep an eye out. Just a tough week in Indiana altogether. Weather as well. We didn't want to gloss over the fact that there's been tornadoes and probable flooding in these next few days that have impacted people greatly. I live in Brownsburg. I've lived here almost my whole life, and I can't recall a worse storm than what we had this week. Where we had my daughter's birthday party, that place is ruined. Where I used to take my very first car to get fixed. That building was built in the 1800s, and it's going to have to be demolished now. So it's a lot of memories gone this week. Obviously, Brownsburg, the Carmel area, Terre Haute area, South Bend, Bloomington, lots of places. I'm sure a lot of you watching, listening right now have been affected in one way or another. So our thoughts are with you. For me personally in Brownsburg, I've looked around for ways to help. There doesn't seem to be anything official, but whether it's Brownsburg or any of these other areas, if you want to help, redcross.org is always a great resource. You can choose to donate to your local community impact cells there. So there's that. Obviously, in Brownsburg, the town has just recommended going around and seeing where there's damage and seeing if businesses and people need help. So if you're looking for ways to help there, obviously those are ways you can do it. So we're thinking about you, Indiana. It's not been the greatest week. But with that, we are going to sign off for today. Obviously, thanks for James being on here. Follow us all on social media. If you don't already, like and subscribe. James has got his podcast as well, the James Boyd podcast. So hope you guys enjoyed the show today. We had a blast. We got more stuff coming next week. A lot of stuff hit the cutting room floor today because we had some fun here. But yeah, you guys have a great day, and we will see you next week.